Oh, goody. I have to push that button. I've likened this Bible study to the difference between flying to Florida, driving to Florida, or walking to Florida. We're walking through the Gospel of John. And this way we get to know the people along the way, and we get to know the places and the cuisine and the climate and stuff, instead of just flying over and then you're there and you miss all of the ambiance of and the nuance of the trip. So today we're going to start in chapter 2, and we're over at verse 11. Because we've just had the wedding where Jesus turned the water into wine. And concluding the wedding, verse 11 says, "This beginning of miracles did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested forth his glory, and his disciples believed on him." This is the beginning of miracles. It's not the beginning of every miracle that's going to be recorded in all of the Gospels, in all four of the Gospels. But John specifically uses miracles, and he calls them signs. He doesn't refer to them as miracles. That word translated miracles is actually Simeon, which is should be translated signs. And probably some better translations in the King James is miracles, but some better translations, modern translations, would say signs. And I want to talk about that because signs, and especially the way John uses it, he's pointing to something. It's we know of a stop sign or a sign that means just to signify something. Well, it's also to signal something. In other words, it's a breadcrumb along a way leading you somewhere. So his signs, there's 8 miracles or 8 signs that John talks about. And they're all painting a picture. The breadcrumbs leading us to a conclusion, to paint a picture of something. John was very close to Jesus. He refers to himself as the one that Jesus loved. And he's a firsthand witness. He's also written this gospel after the other 3 gospels, decades, or more afterwards. So his assumption is that we already know the synoptic gospels. We already know Matthew, Mark, and Luke. We know those accounts. So his is kind of like he's summing it up and putting a real divine spin on it. And the idea of these signs is that it says the beginning, this is the beginning of these signs. So first one, the wedding of Cana, okay? So we will, as we progress through this book, we're gonna see, oh, there's the second one, and there's the third one. Well, Jesus did a lot of miracles. John even says that if we were gonna record all those miracles that he did, there wouldn't be enough books that could hold it. There's other parts of the Gospels where he said Jesus did many mighty works there, many miracles were done there. Doesn't specify. Wherever he went, he was healing all who were sick. He was doing good, healing all who were sick. That's what he is. He is the kingdom of God, the king of the kingdom of God on the earth, in the darkness, making it light, making it alive, come alive wherever he is, making everything sacred space wherever he was. Always miraculous, walking in the supernatural. So these 8 that John is specifying, that here you're calling our signs that signify something, that signal something, I want you to bear that in the back of your mind as we read through this, as we walk through this book. So the beginning of miracles did Jesus, or the beginning of these signs at the wedding of Cana. After this, in verse 12, after this, he went down to Capernaum, he and his mom, his disciples, or his brethren and his disciples, his brethren, his family. So he and his mom and his family and the disciples go to Capernaum. That actually becomes his headquarters, his base of operations is Capernaum. And the Jews' Passover was at hand. And Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Mountainous, goes up to Jerusalem. Well, Passover in Jerusalem is a huge deal. But it's interesting the way this is phrased. It's the Jews' Passover. The Jews' Passover. In the Bollinger Bible, which is my preferred study Bible, it's got some really, really great notes, referring to it as the Jews' Passover. After the revival under Ezra and Nehemiah, this is in Jerusalem, in Israel, after the revival under Ezra and Nehemiah, corruption proceeded. Prophets would warn them, things that could go good, things could go bad. Prophets would warn them. They didn't obey and things would go bad and corruption would happen. So corruption proceeded apace, and the Lord found the nation as described in Malachi. The Lord Jesus finds the nation when he's there, when he's going to this Passover, he finds it in terrible shape. As we find that it was described in Malachi. I'll refresh your memory on Malachi. It's the last prophet in the Old Testament, the last prophecy, and it's the last prophet, the 400 years of silence after him, before Jesus comes, for John the Baptist. But Malachi it's one of the minor prophets, but I'm going to read you, let's see. Chapter 2 of Malachi. You don't have to turn to it. I'll just whip through it. Verse 7, we'll start there. Verse 7. For the priest's lips should keep knowledge, and they should seek the law at his mouth, for he is the messenger of the Lord of hosts. But ye are departed out of the way. You have caused many to stumble at the law. You have corrupted the covenant of Levi. The Levites was the tribe that they were the priesthood. You've corrupted the covenant of Levi, saith the Lord of hosts. Verse 9. Therefore have I also made you contemptible and base before all the people, according as you have not kept my ways, but have been partial in the law. Verse 10. Have we not all one Father? Hath not one God created us? Why do we deal treacherously, every man against his brother, by profaning the covenant of our fathers? Judah has dealt treacherously, and an abomination is committed in Israel and in Jerusalem, for Judah hath profaned the holiness of the Lord, which he loved, and hath married the daughter of a strange God. This is just a few verses of most of the prophecy is about how they have become corrupted. Now, hence, what were once the feasts of Jehovah, these feasts like the Passover, like the Pentecost, like, other of their feasts, the feasts of Jehovah, a holy thing to God. They are now spoken of as what they had become, the feasts of the Jews. It was just a religious excuse to get together. It had lost its meaning, it had lost its power, it had lost its holiness. If we go over to in John 1:19, that is where when the Jews sent the priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, who are you? When they came to check out John and find out, what do you do? Who are you? What are you doing? Why is everybody coming out and you're baptizing? What's going on here? Well, referring to the Jews, which is a characteristic expression of the Gospel of John, pointing to the consequences of their rejection of Messiah when they would be, lo, Ami, or not my people, no longer regarded as Israel, but as Jews, the name given to them by Gentiles. It's a little bit of background into what Jesus was walking into as we proceed here. So the Jews' Passover was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem and found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and doves and the changers of money sitting. Well, it's not unusual to sell the animals for sacrifice there for a couple of reasons. A long time ago, before this time, in the early parts of first temples, this was the third temple that had been built in with a tabernacle before that. But well, let me explain that. Maybe you didn't realize that this was the third temple. The first temple built by Solomon, then there was a second temple built by the Jews returning from their Babylonian exile. This third temple is known as Herod's temple. It was built by Herod, not so much to facilitate Israel's worship. Herod was half Jew, but he wasn't necessarily a religious practicing Jew. He was a very powerful man and built a lot of great stuff, and the temple was one of his big achievements. But it wasn't so much for him to honor God as it was to facilitate Israel's worship. But it was his attempt to reconcile the Jews to their king, to King Herod. It began the constructing of it 19 years before Jesus was born, and it continued for 46 years. So let's see, Jesus, when he was born, it was almost 20 years old. So he had another 26 years of that being under construction during his life. So by the time he gets there, it's in full swing, but there's constantly building it. The temple was largely complete, but it was fully completed a mere 6 years before it was destroyed in 70 AD, and it's never been rebuilt since. It's just interesting that you have all of these temples, but you have a degrading Jewish worship by the time Jesus shows up. It's become religious, it's become rote and corrupt. And then after, well, we're gonna read on, but the temple is ultimately destroyed, and they've just given up on that altogether. From the glorious beginnings it had with Moses in the wilderness, in the tabernacle. Now remember, when he was a boy, and when he was like 12, he was at the temple in Jerusalem, and that's when they were so amazed at his wisdom as he was talking. That's when his family went, they were all leaving, going back home, and they realized he'd stayed there. They left him there. They had to go back and find him. But at that point, that was a good experience, because it's the way it should have been, a place to worship and to worship God and to study his word. That's what his 12-year-old experience was. Now, nearly 20 years later, it has changed greatly, and thus it is in need of a cleansing. Now we read that, and found in the temple those that sold the oxen and sheep and doves and the changers of money sitting there. Well, the fact that there was people who were buying the sacrifices for the Passover wasn't necessarily such a bad thing. They used to be able to buy them outside the court, because people who were traveling sometimes from other nations and many, many days journey, it was difficult to bring a lamb or their sacrifice, their animal with them. And so they would sell one of theirs back home, take the money, come here, buy one, and then use that as their sacrifice, which was acceptable. That's not in itself isn't the bad thing. But the corrupt money changers took advantage and charged exorbitant prices. Plus, they also started to move the animals closer into the temple area. Now, the Gentile Christians couldn't worship. They could only worship in the courtyard, not in the temple itself. But the animals were now coming in, and I mean, like, it was like the stockyards, because you had thousands and thousands and thousands of people coming in. So you had thousands and thousands of animals being bought and sold there. Well, they've forced the Gentiles out now, because now it's become a place to do business, to sell the stuff and to exchange the money. Every adult male had to pay a temple tax to come in to the temple that day, and you had to be with Jewish coinage, and so whatever their local currency was, they had to convert that like a currency exchange. So the money changers are making money left and right and charging they had a captive audience, so they could get whatever price they wanted. So that was really, really bad. That is bad stuff going on there. And so Jesus walks into that. He finds the money changers and the sheep and the doves and the oxen and the changers of money sitting there. Well, so he makes a scourge or a whip out of small cords that he found there. It could have been things that had been used for the animals lying on around, but he makes this whip. And let's see, and takes this, here we go. And when he made the scourge of small cords, he drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and he poured out the money changers' money and overthrew the tables. He didn't whip the people, but he used the whip probably to help scoot the animals out of the place. But his whole idea was, get out of here. You don't belong here. And he was pissed off at them because of their usury with their money exchanging and stuff. And they flipped over the tables, and all their money goes all over the place. And then he said unto them that sold doves, he says, take these things hence, make not my Father's house an house of merchandise. So he was really up to here with it, and he lets them have it. And his disciples remembered that it was written in Psalm 69:9, the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up, or consumed me. He was overwhelmed, overtaken by the zeal for his Father's house. Everybody else had just let it go. It became, a currency exchange. Well, I want to interject something here about my particular position on buying and selling stuff at church. And I'm a businessman, so I understand buying and selling. My previous church experience, I saw that ministry, and as well as a lot of other ministries that were springing up in the 80s and 90s, and it was a source of revenue for the ministries to sell books and tapes, for example. And I looked at that and I always thought, that sounds weird for a church. The gospel should be free, and we support it by our free will offering. And there's something about muddying the waters between what am I giving to support the church and what am I buying from the church to benefit my own edification. Or the kids selling candy for the kids going on a missions trip or something like that. I think that the money that we give for the Lord's work should be freely, nothing in return. We give it, expecting nothing in return, but knowing that we're sowing seed, and that every time you plant a seed, a harvest comes back, but the farmer doesn't know how. The seed goes into the ground and dies, and miraculously it springs forth. So once you participate in the sowing and the reaping, the giving and the receiving, that's like a little perpetual motion machine, because you always get a little more, and then it increases your ability to give. But when that kind of gets distorted or perverted when it's, well, here, we'll sell you this book or these tapes or these CDs or whatever, because we want a little, my position is that if you're gonna buy books and tapes, go buy them. I don't want the church to be in the business of making money off of that, because then what happens is somewhere in our minds we're saying, well, what was our revenue today? What's the inventory like? How much, what was our profit margin? How much did we make today? That I don't like that. I don't want to do that. If somebody wants to buy a book, go on Amazon. They've got a great delivery system for every kind of book you can imagine. And I'm just using books as an example. But our giving, what we give to the Lord should be given to the Lord freely. Freely receive, freely give. I don't want to have a profit motive to any of the thing that we do. We need money. We use money. We have expenses and stuff like that. And so far, it's been from his hand to our mouth. We break even, and we do better than break even sometimes. And I trust in God that's going to increase. But that's just my little thing about money changers, doing business in the church. It always left the bad taste in my mouth. I think we should keep that. Business is business, church is church. Like, you can become friends with the people you do business with, but you shouldn't start doing business with your friends. It just never goes right. Doing business with the people at church doesn't go right. You all know the guy who sells insurance and he joins the church so he can pass out business cards to everybody. Well, he's there for the wrong reason. That's all I'm going to say about it. I don't want to get into meddling. But anyways, verse 18. Then answered the Jews and said unto him. Well, they said something to him because they just saw what he did. They saw him clean house there. He was mad. He flipped over the tables, got the animals out of there, made a big scene. And they says, what sign showest thou unto us, seeing that you do these things? Now, you're presenting yourself like you're in charge. Well, show us. Who are you? And so they asked for a sign. Well, I don't know if they're asking for a miracle, if they knew he was Messiah and could do miracles. They wanted him to establish his credibility. That is verse 19. Now in verse 20, then said the Jews, wait a minute, no, I'm skipping ahead myself. Verse 19, Jesus answers. Jesus answers, and he said unto them, as far as the sign, here, I'll give you a sign. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days, I'll raise it up again. Well, that blew their minds because they had no idea. They couldn't imagine what he was talking about. Tear down this temple. It's been under construction for 46 years. How are you going to build it in 3 days? Which is another thing you find in this Gospel of John, because this idea of not understanding what he's talking about. The woman, the Samaritan woman at the well. Well, where are you going to get this water that they'll never thirst again? You don't have anything to draw out of the well with. Or Nicodemus, well, how am I supposed to be born again, go back into my mother? You know, it's his way of doing a play on words to get him to think. But so anyways, then said the Jews, 46 years was this temple in building, and wilt thou rear it up in 3 days? But he spake of the temple of his body. Now, at church, we've been talking about that we are sacred space. We are the image of God. We are the temple of God. We carry the presence of God with us. We're imbued with him in our personality, in our nature, and we are representing him on the earth. Now, I want to read an excerpt of a book that I just started reading, Paul Tredinger, called The Cool Gospel. But let's see, about this temple and about tearing it down, raising it up. In John's account, Jesus is asked for a sign to authorize his action that he did in kicking everybody out, the money changers. And he offers, destroy this temple, and in 3 days, I will raise it up. Well, obviously that was misunderstood by the hearers. And this gentleman writes, it's a characteristic feature in John's gospel. It's exemplified by the response of Nicodemus in chapter 3 verse 4, and the initial response of the Samaritan woman at the well in chapter 4:11. The true temple, as Jesus revealed to the Samaritan woman in chapter 4, is neither on Mount Gerizim nor in Jerusalem. Because she says, I know my people worship on this mountain, your people worship in Jerusalem. Where's the place where you should really worship? Was her question to him. And he says, it's neither one of those places, but it will be made manifest when the hour, when John, the Gospel of John, when he writes about the hour, it's always in reference to the cross. That's the hour that he refers to. So when Jesus says, neither on this mountain or Jerusalem, but it will be made manifest when the hour comes. The temple is for all who worship the Father in spirit and in truth, John 4:21-23. When Jesus was crucified, the veil of the temple was rent, it was torn, and the Holy of Holies, the very presence of God, was opened for all. Now this, for John, fulfilled the words of Isaiah, my house shall be a house of prayer for all people. And the Te Deum, which is a Latin, I don't know if it's a creed or whatever it is, but it says that when he had overcome the sharpness of death, he opened the kingdom of heaven to all believers. And so it's not just a practical thing that he was brooming the temple and mad at the money changers. He does it again at the end of his ministry, by the way. I don't think that's recorded in John, but it's recorded in one of the other Gospels. When he, in verse 22, when therefore he was risen from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this unto them, and they believed the scripture and the word which Jesus had said. Now, let's see, I think we can wrap this up pretty quickly, but I want to add to this that then they remembered what he had said unto them. Part of having the Old Testament and the New Testament is when you read the Old Testament, you realize that the Jews who could not see the future, they had this as their only connection to God. And when Messiah came, they had that, oh, you're the one of the book. This is what they've been saying all of these years. And so they who were with him had that same, oh, when they were seeing this happen in their own eyes, experiencing it, and they believed the scripture. Faith comes by hearing the word of God. And when you see Jesus with your spiritual eyes, and you realize that the word that for thousands of years, even ahead of time, was telling us what was going to happen, that makes your faith even stronger. Now, in 23, now when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover, the feast day, many believed in his name when they saw the miracles that he did. Miracles, plural. John's going to talk, he's going to cite 8 of these as signs that are pointing to the cross and pointing to who Jesus is. But Jesus did not commit or did not trust himself unto them, because he knew all. He knew all about men. And he knew that because they saw these miracles, they were not believing him to be Messiah. So and he needed not that any should testify of man, for he knew what was in man. Jesus did not want the word getting out on the street prematurely until he finished all of his works. He had a schedule to keep, he had a job to do, and we're going to see more about this as we progress through the wonderful book of John. The man who knew Jesus personally knew him well. I pray that reading the Bible and hearing these words helps us to know Jesus really well, like John did. So that's all I got to say for tonight. I want a minute over.
Thank you so much, Pastor John. We loved hearing, I love hearing about how things were happening during Jesus's time on earth. You bring us back, you paint a good picture. And of course, it's awesome to learn about our Savior and the way that he was walking on earth.
Yeah, we appreciate the message, John. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Well, I hope you like the breadcrumbs.
I did like that.
Yeah. Okay, folks. Well, how many people do we have tonight?
We
Can you
have
give us a count,
12,
Lillian?
we have 12 people tonight, 13
Nice.
including you. And I hope everyone is getting the email. So if you could please.
I got mine.
Sunday. Yeah, I hope, because we did send them out to everybody. So hopefully nobody's email is in the junk folder. Hopefully I'm not in someone's junk.
Well, they're not here. They wouldn't know. This will be on YouTube as soon as we get it posted in the next day or so. So we can, I'm sort of getting my sea legs to how this all works, but I hope that that I'll get my stride, and that this will, we'll get the whole format down really well. It's different preparing for 30 minutes than it is for an hour. You think, oh, it's half as much work. It's actually twice as much work. Every single word counts. I'm not used to this, but I would like us to be able to invite some of our friends who might be fallen out of going to church, or never went to church, but they're spiritually curious, or people who've gotten hurt at church, or people who live far away and don't have access to a groovy church, because this is why we're doing this. It's for our edification, but also to give other people a taste of what the life is like at Grace Gospel Fellowship, because we have a great fellowship. We have a wonderful love for each other. And I am so loving being able to see you folks like this, in your homes, face to face, in the middle of the week. It's really sweet for me. So I hope it'll keep you all tuning in, and then I'll see you all on Sunday. I don't think there's anything else I got to say. So with that, I'm going to say good night and sweet dreams to you all. I love you all. Thank you.
Pastor. Thank
See
you.
ya.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful night, and I hope to see you all Sunday.
Bye.
Justine, I'm glad you made it.
Oops.
Bye, Judy. Bye, Sue. See you later, brethren.
Okay.